So, hello everyone, and welcome to the first live event organized as part of the 2024 McGill World Restart a Heart campaign. WRAH is a global initiative aiming to empower individuals to respond to cardiac arrest. For those of you who may not know us, we are a student-led, faculty-supported global initiative started within the Faculty of Medicine and Health Science here at McGill University. Our main goal is to inspire people to act and give them the skills to respond to cardiac arrest. We believe that this is an important public health investment and perhaps the most impactful approach to reducing morbidity and mortality in cardiac arrest. My name is Arianne Racine. I'm a third-year medical student at McGill University, and I'm the public relation lead of McGill World Restart a Heart 2024.
Hi, everyone. My name is Bianca Mammarella, and I'm a Master's of Public Policy student at McGill University. I am also on McGill's World Restart a Heart Day team for this 2024-2025 academic year. Today, we have the privilege of being joined by leaders in out-of-hospital cardiac arrest, survival, and automated external defibrillator, or AED, awareness. Our guests today have made tremendous efforts to improve cardiac resuscitation outcomes. Their efforts are helping reshape the future of how we respond to sudden cardiac arrest. Today, we are diving into an incredibly important topic: universal, fast, and accessible AEDs, the future of cardiac arrest care. This is a continuation of the conversation we had hosted in 2021, given the rapid changes in the files of AEDs. We will discuss the latest technological advancements, including pocket AEDs, mobile AEDs, and even drone delivery systems that aim to make AEDs accessible faster than ever before. We will be exploring how innovative solutions like AED locator apps can make bystanders find the nearest device during an emergency, ensuring no precious time is wasted. So today we have Dr. Sheldon Cheskes, and today he is going to present as a professor with the Division of Emergency Medicine from the Department of Family and Community Medicine at the University of Toronto, and a scientist at St. Michael's Hospital, also located in Toronto. He's the principal investigator of the recently published double sequential external defibrillator in refractory ventricular defibrillation, or DOSE-VF, trial exploring external defibrillation strategies for refractory ventricular fibrillation during out-of-hospital cardiac arrest.
We are
Thank
also pleased, we are
no.
also pleased to have Dr. François de Champlain, an emergency medicine physician and trauma team leader at MUHC. He's also associated professor in the Department of Emergency Medicine at McGill. He also completed a clinical research training with Harvard Medical School and a master in health leadership at McGill University. Not only that, but he's the founding president of the Jacques de Champlain Foundation, promoting and facilitating public access to defibrillator AED. McGill WRAH is also very lucky to have him as member of the WRAH steering committee. Thank you. Last but not least, Dr. Stephen Brooks. He's a clinician scientist and an emergency physician in the Department of Emergency Medicine at Queen's University. He holds a Master in Health Science from the University of British Columbia and completed a clinical research fellowship in pre-hospital and transport medicine at the University of Toronto. His research focuses on improving bystander resuscitation and public awareness, and public access to defibrillation for out-of-hospital cardiac arrest victim. So we are very thrilled to have you with us today. This panel, like we mentioned, will build on the discussion we had 3 years ago, allowing us to see the progress of your innovative project aimed at enhancing AED accessibility and use in cardiac arrest. Your work plays a vital role in improving out-of-hospital cardiac arrest survival, and we're excited to learn how these developments have advanced since our last conversation. Just to set the tone, I'd like to first share an exceptional video that was created by the member of our student and steering committee during the 2020 campaign on how to respond to a cardiac arrest. In the next 60 seconds, I invite you to learn how to save a life.
In Canada alone, every 12 minutes, someone suffers from a cardiac arrest. If you don't do anything, they are going to die. In the next 60 seconds, we're going to teach you how to save a life.
If you see someone lying unconscious, the first thing you want to do is check if they're responsive.
If they are not responsive and not breathing or breathing abnormally, they are likely suffering from a cardiac arrest.
Call 911, let them know that someone suffered from a cardiac arrest, send someone to find an AD if there's one nearby, and then start chest compressions.
For chest compressions, find the center of the chest, put your dominant hand down, interlock your fingers, and push hard and push fast.
Using an AED is really easy. You just apply the pads, turn on the machine, and follow the voice instruction. The machine will analyze the rhythm and tell you if a shock is recommended.
Dr. Cheskes, thank you for joining us tonight. I was wondering if you can share some details about your Community Responders program, what inspired this initiative, and how is it currently performing? What specific gap does it address? In what locations is it implemented? And what are the next steps to this program?
Oh, very good. Thank you so much, Bianca. And it's great being here again. I was here back in 2021. So I agree with you. I think lots has happened since 2021. It was great to see François and Farhan and the whole group on that 60-second of how to save a life. I think that was amazing. I think our community responder program started out here in Peel Region, mainly to increase the propensity of action of people in communities who sustained cardiac arrest. So what we found was, and I think me and Steve Brooks are sort of leaders in the area of trying to improve access to AEDs in rural and remote areas, but even in areas that are in urban populations. I think we both feel that the current model of just putting AEDs everywhere out there is just not working. And that's supported by the data. We certainly see some patients getting AEDs applied, but the vast majority, unfortunately, are not. And the trouble with that is the current system by which we dispatch paramedics, fire, and police to provide AEDs is just too slow in many particular areas. So what we did in Peel Region was we trained a number of community responders. So these were people who were off-duty fire, police, nurses, or people just interested in saving lives in the community. And we taught them not only how to do CPR and AED, but also provide care in time-sensitive medical emergencies. So we expanded this to anaphylaxis with EpiPens, Narcan, or naloxone for patients with opioid overdoses. So we trained a cadre of community responders in Peel Region, and then began dispatching them through our dispatch center with the aid of Paul Snoblin, who runs our community responder program, to time-sensitive medical emergencies. So this wasn't just cardiac arrest. These were other medical conditions, as I noted earlier. And we tried to learn from what many in Europe have done in this particular area, and they've been very successful at starting community responder programs. The question is, could you be successful here in Canada? So I think the big difference between our program and those in Europe, and the ones in Europe is basically when a community responder is dispatched, they're usually dispatched via a phone app to an area, to go to an area of cardiac arrest, but someone always has to pick up the AED. In our system, we trained our community responders, and we send them out with an AED. So no one has to go fetch the AED, which we think is a huge time saving in this particular process. So we began about a year ago dispatching people to these time-sensitive medical emergencies. And over the year, we dispatched about 1,100 cases in terms of people who had these time-sensitive emergencies. And we found that about a third of the time, our community responders responded to the app. A third of the time, they accepted the call, and about a third of the time, they actually either performed an intervention prior to EMS arrival. And that's very consistent amongst most community responder programs around the world. I think our data right now is still too small to see if we've had an impact in terms of survival or things like that, but I don't think we should really think about that. I think we should think about it in terms of the number of people who've gotten CPR, who've had an AED applied, prior to EMS arrival. So I think right now we're really excited about how this program has started. We work with Steve, and he'll talk about his work and his program, and we're trying to really get a nationwide approach of community responders across Canada that will hopefully be able to speak in the same terms as many of those in Europe, which have had great success with these programs. They're really in their infancy here in Canada. And I think hopefully working with Steve, we'll be able to spread our knowledge and our experiences to try to expand this concept across Canada. So it's been really exciting, but it certainly has been quite challenging as well.
I can imagine. I remember, I believe we talked about this last year in San Diego, and I'm just so happy to hear about the movements that it's made, as well as the progress. Especially, I'm from York region, so hearing about these developments in Peel region is actually very nice to hear. So thank you so much for your work on this. And yeah, at WRAH, we also very much abide by increasing access to individuals to help out in out-of-hospital cardiac arrest, as you can imagine, especially in busy areas of the GTA. Getting individuals there, especially EMS services, sometimes isn't as easy, especially during rush hour traffic. So having individuals like bystanders willing to help out definitely can help save a life in these emergency situations. Moving on to Dr. Brooks. So Dr. Brooks is involved in a similar program called Neighbors Saving Neighbors. It's a new pilot program for cardiac arrest in Frontenac. Can you tell us more about this pilot program, how it's performing, and what are the next steps for this project?
Thanks, Bianca. I think first to say that thank you so much for inviting me here today. I think one of the most amazing things about resuscitation science in Canada is the community. And I'm just so proud of the program at McGill for this project. I'm so happy to be here with two very, important colleagues to me. And we are just three of, nationwide rather small group of individuals who are really trying to innovate and push things forward. And I say that because Dr. Cheskes and I are working very closely together on trying to advance this concept. Our two programs evolved and were launched kind of organically, independently from one another. And I think it's because people are realizing that what we're doing right now, as far as our focus on, training the public in CPR, putting the AEDs out in public spaces and sticking them on the wall, and then kind of crossing our fingers, hoping that everything comes together in the moment of a cardiac arrest. Those are very important foundational steps in improving our response, but we're all recognizing that it's not sufficient. And so I think these two programs were born out of that feeling that we need to innovate, we need to try different strategies, we need to integrate technology that is now available in all of our pockets as far as our mobile phones to try and take advantage of people who are willing, able, and equipped to respond in a different way than we've been organizing ourselves before. So I think this segment of between the 911 call and when the paramedics arrive, up until now, that's been really left up to chance, up to complete luck. And if it worked out, wonderful things happened, people survived. But most of the time, unfortunately, all those pieces don't come together. So that's what I think the bigger picture is here with these programs. And we're just starting out with a couple of different models here. The program in Frontenac is similar to the Peel program in that we have recruited volunteers from the community. We focused on rural settings outside of the urban area north of Kingston, where we see the most need, where the EMS response times are longest, and where we have the most potential to shorten that delay to CPR and AED availability. Similar to the Peel program, we recruit people from those communities, targeting the at-risk communities. They get a criminal background check, they're vetted, they're known and registered formal volunteers for the paramedic service. They get ID, they get a uniform. So it's a step up from those other programs like Pulse Point, where, it's anonymous people signing up for the app and that's the only bar. This is a little bit higher bar we're setting, where these people come in for an 8-hour training day. They learn hands-only CPR. They learn how to use their AED. We teach them how to respond safely and work well with the professionals who are going to arrive. And throughout the year, we do simulation training with them. We do updates on CPR training and recertification. So we kind of engage and build this community of neighbors, saving neighbors. We've recruited 105 volunteers. Over the last year, we've done 63 dispatches focusing only on medical cardiac arrests. Out of those 63, we've had about 43 where there's been at least one volunteer within a 10-kilometer range. And out of that, some cases had multiple responders, but we had 66 volunteers accept the alerts on their Good Sam app and move towards the scene. And then out of that, we had 31 arrive on the scene, 4 cases where they actually did CPR and use an AED before paramedics arrived. And from that, we had 1 survivor case. So that's promising, but as Sheldon was saying, getting data on effectiveness here is going to require a much larger rollout, much larger sample size, and that's what Shell and I are working on as next steps. Good news is we are partnered now. So Dr. Cheskes, the Peel program, the Kingston program, we have joined forces. We've been in touch with the Ministry of Health for some preliminary discussions about potentially integrating this into business as usual for paramedic programs in Ontario. We're applying for a huge CIHR grant to increase rollout in the spring. And we are working to maybe be a little smarter in how we deploy this program. Because I think you've heard from both Shell and I that both programs struggled with a lot of events, a lot of dispatches, but we're not getting there first, like before paramedics in most of the call outs. And we're not getting CPR and AED started like we would hope to in more events. So we're working with optimization modeling experts to look at data of where cardiac arrests happen in our regions over the last few years, where the longest response times are, and we're going to be a little smarter about targeted recruiting in the areas where we think they could benefit most from this type of program. So that's the update. Successful pilots looking to make a bigger rollout, more data, and being a little smarter in how we deploy.
Wow, just like with Dr. Cheskes, the updates from when we had previously spoke to now, I think even me and Dr. Brooks connected in April at a conference that I had hosted, and the updates from April to now are just so substantial. So wow, I'm very happy with how the program's rolling out. And yeah, having you guys join forces definitely sounds like a good idea to allow both of the programs to grow and obviously receive a little bit more support from the provincial government.
Yes. Well, moving on, Dr. de Champlain, you are currently working on improving access to AED in Quebec with your work with the Foundation Jacques de Champlain. For people who are not familiar with your foundation, can you describe its vision and mission for us, please?
Yeah, first of all, Arianne, thanks again for the invitation. And on behalf of the steering committee, I want to thank Sheldon and Steve, who really are top scientists internationally in this field, and also great colleagues and friends. So thank you for joining us. Yeah, the Jacques de Champlain Foundation, in a nutshell, started after the sudden cardiac arrest that my father sustained in 2009 while he was cycling. My father was a physician working in the cardiovascular field. And like almost half of the time, his first symptom of underlying coronary artery disease was a sudden cardiac arrest. And despite a bystander providing CPR, no one knew, the bystander or the EMS 911 dispatcher knew that there was an AED about 200 meters from his location. So that AED was left there and never used. And the ambulance, like many areas in the region of Quebec, took a long time to get there, 27 minutes in his case. And of course, that was game over for him. That was, we came across, it was tragic, of course, for me, my family. But, taking this story, we decided to go ahead and name a foundation really at his name and try to see how can we address this situation? How can we address this problem? And one of the first questions we ask ourselves is, how many AEDs is there in Quebec? And of course, we didn't know the answer to that. So we didn't know if we had enough, likely not too many, and we didn't know where they were, simply. So from there came our mission statement, which is very simple, and it's really to increase out-of-hospital cardiac arrest by optimizing the use of AEDs in the province of Quebec. And our vision is really that every citizen that sustains a cardiac arrest should have the possibility of having an AED used on themselves to maximize this chance of survival. And how do we do this? Well, we created since 2015 a public voluntary registry where people can register their AEDs, and we try to track down those AEDs in public spaces. And this is linked to a free app that anyone can download called AED Quebec to see where are the AEDs around them, of course, in a situation of an emergency, but also the eyes in the field to help us catch really all these AEDs across the province and to eventually optimize their placement. And we also sponsor research grants to improve research here in Quebec in this field. And we try to educate the people that an AED can be used by any citizen without any specific training. But of course, training helps, but we know that we've not had enough people training, and we want to break that barrier of using an AED, essentially. So in a nutshell, that's what we do at the Jacques de Champlain Foundation, which is a nonprofit organization.
Thank you very much, Jacques de Champlain. It seems like you transformed a tragedy into something positive for the whole province. So we really, really appreciate that. You kind of mentioned it a little, but I want to dive a bit into it. As the president and founder of the foundation, you participate in the creation of a provincial registry for AED location and the development of the AED app in Quebec, which helped localizing the nearest AED and also provides access to vital information about how to do CPR and resuscitation. So since this app was launched, and also, you make it possible to register AEDs, so we can have a map of where are the AED in Quebec. But since the app launched in 2015, what has changed, and how many AED are now registered? How many users? What are the next steps for this big project?
Yeah, so that's a very good question. As of today, we have 8,206 AEDs to be precise. So all these AEDs, like I said earlier, it's a voluntary registry. So we have a team of volunteers that are working very hard to actually help people register these AEDs and almost hunt for these AEDs across the province and keep track, because it's one thing to have a registry, but it's another thing to actually keep it up to date. And with this registry, we know from previous research that we did, but also in other places, that it's unlikely that in the situation of an emergency, even someone that has downloaded the AED will think about using it and will be effective in using it to locate the AEDs. They may not. They're probably better than not having any information on the location. But we know from previous data that probably someone guiding them towards the nearest AED is the best option at this point. And that's why we're linking these AEDs with all the 911 communication centers across Quebec. And there's 17 of them. They all have different teams, different size of resources. We're probably halfway through the province right now that our registry is up live in EMS call centers that can be integrated really in their dispatch system when they receive a 911 call, in order to really quickly and efficiently and in a reliable fashion locate the closest AED. And we're trying to get as much data in terms of the use. And again, not all the regions in Quebec are at par or at the same speed into this. But to take the city of Montreal, for example, we know that the AED last year has been used, the AED registry has been used 120 times, more or less. So that means that, over 100 times an EMS dispatcher in the situation of a cardiac arrest was able to use the registry in order to give a directive to a bystander calling of where the nearest AED. We don't know, yet if that AED was actually used, what was the outcome of the patient. Those data are very difficult to link with the call, and there's also sorts of privacy issues, but we're working hard to get outcome data for this project and see the outcome of our work. So far, with the most recent data that I have, we know that there's 115,000 downloads in Quebec of people that have this app on their phone, which is likely not enough, and even more of a reason to continue to communicate the information to the public, but also to link this data with the communication centers.
Thank you very much for your answer. First off, that is very impressive. Second, for everyone who's listening right now, please download the app but it's important to use this platform to make publicity. And also, I think it's very great the switch a bit with the data to go, okay, well, people need to be directed. In the state of panic, they won't necessarily think of the app. So I think it's very great that it has evolved since 2015. I wanted to ask you, because last year on October 16, which is World Restart a Heart Day, the Quebec government announced $3.5 million in financing to your foundation to improve access to AED as part of a global strategy for deployment of AED. This will result in the addition of 1,000 AED in public places in Quebec in the next 3 years, which is already very great. First off, congratulations for that. I don't know how your foundation and yourself manage that, but that's amazing. That's a step in the right direction. Now, 1 year later, 1 year and a day later, what are the results and how has your team decided on the location for these new AEDs?
Yeah, first off, there's a lot of work behind an announcement like that. And between an announcement and actually, and I'm sure my colleagues will smile at this, but between the announcement of a government and money directed towards this announcement, there's a lag. Amongst that 3.5 million, 1.5 was really for the registry and the development of our technology to link it with the communication centers. I think it's important and to mention. And there was 2 million that were really related to trying to first decide where to place 1,000 AEDs that were sponsored. The first 100 of these AEDs were already placed in ATMs with 2 partnership bank in Quebec, or National Bank and Desjardins, not to name them. And we're still finishing collecting data on the 1 year post-implementation of this phase 1. The phase 2 for the 900 AEDs will not be linked at all with the bank. We want to target other locations for different reasons. And we've partnered with Timothy Chang and his group in Toronto, who is an expert in modeling and risk prediction using historical data of cardiac arrest. And we're working with them to come really into a mapping of risk of where those AED would be maximized in their use in spots where EMS arrival or first responders are taking a long time, where there's still a density of population and some events over the year to maximize the chance of this AED being used. Because clearly 1,000 AED seems a big number, but it's clearly not enough for a province as large as Quebec is.
Yeah, definitely. I hear you. It was a great announcement and obviously a great publicity on World Restart a Heart Day.
And if I may add really quickly,
Go
something
ahead.
on this is that another thing that the foundation is working for and lobbying for is legislation for public access AEDs, such as Manitoba and Ontario. And, even though it's great to place 1,000 AEDs, the impact of legislation in Quebec would really be more than tenfold that in terms of amount of additional AEDs the day that a legislation is in effect, just by designated premises where AEDs are mandatory, as well as mandatory registration, which will be for us and our activities a game changer.
Okay, well, thank you very much for that addition. I mean, overall, this is very encouraging news, but I know we have a long step to move forwards. And like you said, the legislation would be a bigger step, but at least we're doing some step in the right direction. So thank you very much for that. Now, Dr. Brooks, you are also the principal investigator of the efficacy of the PulsePoint mobile app, like you mentioned previously. Just to summarize, this app connects people that are trained for CPR with 911 service. When someone calls 911 for a potential cardiac arrest, the PulsePoint app just automatically notifies all PulsePoint users within 400 meters, if I'm correct, of the incident location, and then guides the user towards the emergency and also to the nearest AED. Can you tell us a bit more about this app and how it's performance? I think you had a recent clinical trial, and also on the second hand, can you mention the newly addition of naloxone distribution via PulsePoint app?
Absolutely. So just to put this in context, we were speaking earlier, Dr. Cheskes and I, about, a particular approach to community responder programs, that is the Neighbor Saving Neighbors and the Peel Community Responder Program. PulsePoint is a slightly different approach where the users of the PulsePoint app are simply app users. And all you have to do to be a PulsePoint user and a PulsePoint community responder is literally download the app onto your phone and then click a box that acknowledges that you are trained in CPR and you're willing to help and respond in the time of an emergency if you're notified. And it's important to recognize that, there are community volunteer responder programs being trialed around the world, and each program has these different features that may seem subtle to the outside viewer and the listeners today, but are major differences in the nature of the program. And so this PulsePoint program is, I call it kind of like a low touch program. It's from the point of view of each volunteer is much less expensive for the jurisdiction or the organization implementing this style of community responder program, because essentially the people who download the app are almost anonymous. They are not vetted, they are not trained in any particular way, and they do not carry AEDs. So the power of this model is that it can attract many, many community bystanders in high volumes and high density across a region if you invest in marketing and advertising the availability of it. Whereas the community volunteer responders like Neighbor Saving Neighbors and the Peel program has lower volumes, higher costs per volunteer, and takes a lot of effort and investment in the equipment that they carry relative to this model. So that's really important context. So this PulsePoint, Respond app is essentially, they were the pioneers in mobile device crowdsourcing apps to crowdsource basic life support for people experiencing cardiac arrest in the community. And importantly, in most communities, and certainly in the clinical trial, we're focused only on cardiac arrests in public locations. There are advancements in the PulsePoint approach that have different kind of levels of responders, some of which now are more like the Neighbor Saving Neighbors responders who are kind of vetted and known to the EMS agency who's sponsoring. But the main and original model of PulsePoint was that these were anonymous users responding to public location cardiac arrests only. So it's important to recognize that 80% of cardiac arrests occur in residential settings in people's homes, and 20% happens out in public. this approach that we are taking in this trial addresses that 20% of people who have their arrest out in public. And as you mentioned, it's basically crowdsourcing. People get a notification and a map directing them to where the incident is on their PulsePoint app, and they have an opportunity to go there, start CPR, and they're also notified of the nearest AED as per the local AED registry. So they have an opportunity to kind of go and get the AED on their way to the scene, or send somebody else to go and get the AED and get that AED on scene. So we're studying this in a randomized controlled trial. We've implemented it in a number of communities in Canada, but the trial community is all of British Columbia, 4 million residents, and we've rolled it out through British Columbia Emergency Health Services, one of the largest EMS services in the continent, and also in Columbus, Ohio, a city of 1 million people in the US. So we have these 2 study sites. The 911 calls suspected of being cardiac arrest get randomized to either have the PulsePoint system active or stay suppressed, which is sort of the control group. And then we're basically comparing the 2 groups at the end of the day who actually have real cardiac arrest, and we're comparing rates of bystander CPR and AED use between the 2 groups. The trial has been a very difficult undertaking. So, list of problems that happened to us during the study: a global pandemic, crazy technological implementation difficulties, some really high bar privacy and community consultation requirements from our REBs at the beginning of the study, where we literally had to design a whole other survey study to make sure that everybody in the community was okay with this concept of having essentially strangers show up after they call 911 to potentially help. So it's just been a really, really difficult trial to manage. We just heard a few weeks ago that we were awarded $200,000 from Zoll Medical Corporation. So thank you to Zoll, who essentially saved this trial because we ran out of money. And Zoll has come in to provide that support to allow us to finish to our target sample size. So absolutely overjoyed at that we'll be able to finish this trial. Just to your, and we've recruited about 60% of our target sample size. So we're getting there, but still a ways to go. We expect to have everybody recruited in about 18 months. So hopefully next time we do this, or maybe the time after that, I'll have some results to share with you. But unfortunately, the trial's blinded, so I can't really spill the beans quite yet. On the naloxone issue, so PulsePoint is one of the most progressive and innovative companies in the space that I know. I think they are amazing, and they make such great tech products. And they are really pushing on AEDs. So their original focus was on this, PulsePoint Respond app and getting people to the scene, but they've recognized that they need to do more to get AEDs on the scene. So I would encourage everyone to look at the PulsePoint AED app. And this sort of integrates with PulsePoint Respond. It's sort of the feed data source for the Respond app that tells the responders where the AEDs are. But this AED app allows people to upload new AEDs they find in the community to add to the registry. And it also now allows people to indicate if there are co-located first aid equipment with AEDs, which is becoming more and more prevalent. So you can indicate in this database whether there's naloxone there for opiate overdoses, of course, the antidote for opiates, whether there's an EpiPen there for anaphylaxis emergencies, and you'll see sometimes now stop bleed kits for traumatic, life-threatening bleeding, also sometimes co-located with AEDs. That tends to be more of an American thing, given the tendency for penetrating trauma in the US, unfortunately, but we're starting to see that in Canada as well. So PulsePoint AED has incorporated new indicators so that people responding to emergencies, and importantly, the 911 call takers, will be able to know where there is an AED, but now also where's their naloxone, where's their EpiPens, and where's their stop bleed kits. So they're really pushing, innovating, and I think we're going to see more amazing things coming from PulsePoint in the future.
Amazing. This project sounds promising. It sounds also tiring, but we're excited to hear the next update and hopefully to see some improvement.
I didn't
Now,
have gray hair at the beginning of the pulse point trial, and now I do. So that'll just give you
yeah,
an indication. Yeah.
yeah, not gonna comment on this. Um, so I'm just forwarding the next question to Dr. de Champlain. In 2021, you participated in a study called Crowdsourcing to Save a Life, a scoping review of bystander alert technologies for out-of-hospital cardiac arrest, which you also did with Dr. Brooks, who's also on the panel today with us. Can you share with us the conclusion of the scoping review and how this applies here in Quebec?
Yeah, so in the scoping review, we search, obviously, in different search strategy and different database, the amount of articles that were really talking about crowdsourcing apps and their efficiency. We retain about 65 articles where we, from 15 different countries, where the crowdsourcing apps were used, but only really found 10 that were addressing significant outcomes, mainly survival outcomes. From these 10 studies, from various methodology and quality and size, there was a trend towards increased survival. But really, the designs of a lot of these studies were not conclusive. And like Dr. Brooks said, we definitely need more larger sample size and better data to really tell us if those wide types of crowdsourcing apps, which really was that scoping review was addressing or looking at, and not necessarily community response program as we spoke today. So again, very different in terms of a widespread use and registration from these apps. The application locally of that, and of course, like any scoping reviews or review articles, the conclusion is usually that more studies are needed and more outcome studies are needed. And that was our main conclusion, that we need bigger, larger, and outcome-based studies on this topic. The application in Quebec, I think that we're looking at those community response programs, such as the Frontenac and Peel region. And, we're really debating right now if we should go with a large-scale crowdsourcing app available to everyone with or without training and without special equipment, such as an AED response program, versus really targeting community response programs. And so we're looking very carefully at what our neighbors are doing with those programs. We're also looking at what is being done. I think there's great example. I think Dr. Cheskes mentioned in Europe, especially, for example, Denmark, who has a community response program linked to a crowdsourcing app where 160,000 citizens are registered, and 6 times out of 10, they actually arrive prior to the ambulance. And that program does not have, they don't carry AEDs. And their data that is not yet fully published seems to point that they tripled the survival with this program. I do not know that we can reproduce this in our community or in Canada. The European philosophy on this, there's a bit of a different mentality. Resuscitation techniques are widespread, taught in schooling program as well. So it's part of the culture. So there's also a culture change to address here. So it is a complicated solution and probably from multi-source solution that will really make population buy-in into these programs. So to answer in a short, we're looking at what's going on out there, and we're looking at how we can best apply this in Quebec, looking at the experience that is being done as well elsewhere.
Yeah, I understand the challenges, especially with it being such a new technology that's being rolled out in different countries who may have, like you said, like different policies with it being taught in school, as well as how it's being rolled out in those countries' governments. So yeah, some data is, still useful, although as more and more countries adopt this and as more and more apps do come out, I hope that you in some capacity do repeat this review to see if any new data does come out and if we're able to find anything else from apps that do service this kind of stuff. Now switching topics, focusing back on Dr. Cheskes. So another revolution in AED and cardiac arrest is double sequential external defibrillation. So Dr. Cheskes, can you tell us the latest updates specifically about the DOSE VF pilot trial?
Yeah, so no, Dose VF isn't a pilot trial anymore. So we're going off the a little bit off the AD thing discussion. Again, this is for something completely different, but maybe a good topic for Canadian-led resuscitation research that's changed practice. So the whole concept of double sequential defibrillation was really the fact that many people, this is great, we're talking about AEDs, but there are certainly at least 50% of people don't respond to initial defibrillation, and 50% of them are going to require 3 or more shocks to actually what we call terminate VF or end ventricular fibrillation. So there had been previously observational studies that looked at this concept of using 2 defibrillators almost simultaneously to shock a patient who was in this, what we would call refractory VF. But those studies were all observational studies. There was never a randomized controlled trial that looked at this particular question. So our research team basically designed and carried out a randomized trial that looked at patients who presented in refractory VF, and then we randomized our EMS services to 3 different arms. One arm was continued resuscitation with the patient getting standard defibrillation, so with pads in the AL position. The second arm was changing the pads from the AL to the AP position, otherwise known as vector change. And the third arm was double sequential defibrillation, where a second defibrillator was brought on scene. Pads were placed in the AP position in addition to the original AL pads, and shock was given sequentially by 2 defibrillators. So the trial ran for over 4 years in Ontario, Canada, 6 EMS agencies, and ended in May of 2022. And the results of the study showed that this double sequential technique resulted in a survival rate of 30.4%. It was 21.7% for the vector change technique and 13.3% for the standard defibrillation technique. So this was really crazy, only because most resuscitation trials are always negative. It's very rare to get a positive trial, and a positive trial really had an impact by changing guidelines. So the ILCOR guidelines changed as a result of the trial. The trial was published in the New England Journal in November of 2022, and I'm sure the technique is going to be described in both the AHA and ERC guidelines in 2025. So I think the excitement of the trial was, one, it was Canadian-led. It was a Canadian trial, 6 Ontario EMS agencies, and it's rare to do a trial that actually changes practice. I think as an investigator myself, probably the most rewarding thing for me is I get 2 to 3 emails every week from people around the world who have used the technique and have saved people's lives. And these are people from ICU, cardiologists, intensive care, and that really makes you feel like you've actually accomplished something in this resuscitation world that we all live in. And, my hair was darker before, Steve's is grayer, but Dose VF was a 10-year process from original concept to the publication of the trial. But I think anytime that you can do research that changes practice, I think we all have to be pretty proud of that. So I think as a Canadian resuscitation scientist, I think we're pretty proud of what we've been able to accomplish with that particular trial. So hopefully that gives you a thumbnail in terms of what we're able to do there.
Yeah, remarkable stuff that was done. I remember when, the trial had concluded, and just so many different conversations were spurring, not only just ELCOR, but just all around the world with how this, kind of changes the pace of conversations, right? as we know that most out-of-hospital cardiac arrests do happen in the home, and unfortunately only 10% of those individuals do survive. So having new emerging technologies that do come up and are showing some promising results, taking some time to investigate them a little more is definitely something that could change the pace of the conversation in the future. Flipping conversation back to Dr. Brooks. So you've been working for a couple of years now on the development of mobile as well as pocket AED devices. So this is a portable, affordable option that could significantly improve AED home access. So I was wondering if you can tell us the latest updates on CellAid and what has happened since the sale launch in Australia in 2022.
Absolutely. So first of all, it's really important that everybody knows that there's a real obvious conflict of interest here. So take everything I say about this CellAid in particular in that context. I'm a paid chief medical officer for the company. I'm invested in the company. So it's important that everybody knows that when I'm speaking on this topic. But just to segue from Sheldon's amazing, incredible, practice-changing, like globally impactful work. First of all, congratulations, Shell. I mean, I think he probably has more air miles than all of us put together now because of this result. And we are all just so proud of you and how that all happened. So, but I think it's like, let's just think about what that was. That was like taking two defibrillators and pushing two buttons once after the other, and it worked. It worked. That's crazy. Okay, and it's opening the door. First of all, I think everybody should realize that most of us on planet Earth really don't understand how defibrillation happens. We really don't know at like a cellular level. And we've gotten so ingrained into thinking about a classic biphasic, truncated, or biphasic, a rectilinear waveform, these biphasic waveforms. There's only really a couple of them that are in most machines out there. And we're not using that waveform because they've been compared against a million other potential waveforms, and they came out on top. It's really just, those have been demonstrated to work. But we don't really know the best way to defibrillate people. Recently, there was another trial coming out showing, from in an observational study that anterior posterior pad position is maybe better right off the bat than the traditional anterior anterolateral position with respect to survival in an observational study from one center. And again, that's just another hint here that we probably haven't experimented enough yet with different waveforms and how we deliver electricity to get the biggest bang for our buck when we defibrillate people. So CellAid is another chapter in this story, which is essentially recognizing that 97% of people who have a cardiac arrest outside of a hospital do not have the advantage of getting an AED on their chest. Let's just let that sink in for a second. And this is nothing against the importance of public access defibrillation models, but I think we've understood now that we cannot rely on traditional public access defibrillation models to provide early defibrillation for all people, for most people, for the great majority of people who have their cardiac arrests. And CellAid is a story about an innovation in the waveform that then facilitated, because of engineering, a smaller battery, a smaller package, and a lower cost, improving the portability of the device and allowing it to be considered in different settings. So I have to show it here to just put this into context. This is a 400-gram single-use defibrillator. So it's really walking. You snap it in half to get it going. So this is really different from a traditional defibrillator. And the idea here is that the innovation in the electrical engineering might allow a different form, which then allows a different way to roll out defibrillators into our communities. So whereas this one is sort of designed for people to own themselves, traditional AEDs are designed and built as medical equipment that's owned by businesses or organizations. And by miniaturizing and dropping the price, the hope is that people will carry them like I do in my backpack, in their car, in their home. And so when that emergency happens, just like grabbing for a fire extinguisher under your sink, you will grab for your defibrillator, on the wall beside your fridge, or you reach into your purse or your backpack or the glove box of your car, and it's there. And it gets away from that idea that with this public access defibrillation model, we have to go somewhere else, find it, retrieve it, bring it back on the scene. We just know that unfortunately that only happens in the rare event of cardiac arrest. And this is flipping the model, saying if everyone owned a defibrillator, or if a lot of people owned a defibrillator and they were more ubiquitous, more available in residences, then perhaps we could really start seeing, you know, advances in the number of people get defibrillated early. So just a quick update. Cellate is still alive. The company Rapid Response Revival is working so hard. They are putting everything into trying to keep this business going long enough for the tipping point to happen. They sold more defibrillators in Australia than any other brand at 14,000 units in 2023. They are still looking for stabilization funding, so they need investors still. They're not quite at the point where this startup company can survive on their monthly sales alone. So it's a really difficult time for the company. They're working on things like cardiac safe city concepts where they blanket a residential area with, you know, every 2 or 3 houses having one of these in them. They're trying to expand their markets, and they're looking to approach the FDA within the next year or two. So I hope this company survives. I hope the product survives, but mostly I hope that this is another thing, just like Sheldon's work and just like the other companies that are thinking outside of the box, that we have to start changing the technology to address our needs. Right now, we're designing crazy systems to work around technology that doesn't fit our needs and doesn't deal with the problem. So I hope this inspires other people to think that way too, that we don't have to be fixed with a box stuck on the wall.
I completely agree. And I also agree that as technology kind of progresses, you know, society's perceptions of AED, this formal, large device that costs thousands of dollars, isn't the only way that we can successfully defibrillate. Hopefully also this change of conversation also prevents you from getting stopped so many times at the airport. As you had mentioned, that Cellate does cause quite a bit of controversy with border security officers. So hopefully, as you know, this becomes more and more public knowledge. You know, have a little bit of an easier time through the airport. Flipping back actually to Dr. Cheskes, speaking about AED accessibility and trying to increase this in both society and as well as different communities. So a very interesting project that you're working on is AED on the fly. So drone delivery program, recently completed phase 2 of the project. I was wondering if you're able to give us any updates on this project and any new projections for the future.
Oh, Bianca, you took me from the penthouse of Dose VF to the outhouse of my drone work. People ask me, what was the highlight of my resuscitation career? It was Dose VF. What was the low light? It was my drone work. And I'm going to explain it to you. And it's not because it's a bad idea. I think it's a great, phenomenal idea. And I love the fact how Steve mentioned this whole concept of defibrillation. I think for years we fell asleep on biphasic defibrillation. The manufacturer had, they said, okay, we do biphasic defibrillation and people survive. But the honest truth is they don't. And we found better ways to do that. That's what DSED was about. That's what Cell AED is about. It's about thinking outside the box and not falling asleep on these long believed rules about defibrillation that in fact may not be the best. So I think that's really important. The drone concept was a great idea in my book. We did a lot of geospatial work, knowing that, and feasibility work that showed that if we had drones in certain areas and launched them, we could actually improve on EMS response times, in particular in rural and remote areas. And I think it's been shown that if you put these concepts to place in places with already short response times, you're unlikely going to make a big difference. I think what we did in our second step is we wanted to see if we knew drone spots, and we said a 911 call, a mock 911 call to a dispatch, could a drone go to an unknown spot quicker than EMS response to those spots? And so we did a number of experiments up in north and in Muskoka, Ontario, and we found using this technique that the drone could still get there first. We flew the drone at night. We flew the drone at wind. We flew the drone in a wide variety of situations, and it's quite clear that drone use is feasible. So once we completed that, we went to the regulator. The regulators are NAV Canada and Transport Canada, and said we wanted to do this as part of an EMS response. That was always the aim, was to do this as part of an EMS response. It wasn't just to keep practicing and doing this. And we had a model very similar to the model in Sweden, where in Sweden, what they do is they launch their drones in regulated airspace. If a call and GPS coordinate comes in, they contact air traffic control, ensure safety of the flight, and they launch the drone. And we were working with the NavCan app. NavCan has an app, and what we proposed was that if the GPS coordinate of the cardiac arrest came in and it was in a very safe area, we would just launch. If it came in an area that was questionable, we would contact air traffic control. If it came in an area that was too close to the airport, we wouldn't launch. So this was exactly what the Swedes did. We presented it to Nav Canada, and we never heard back from them. We had multiple meetings, and at one point we just never heard back from them. And that's what killed that idea. The idea of drone dispatch of cardiac arrest is a phenomenal idea. The regulator has killed the idea. It's not about money. We had plenty of grant money to do this, and the Swedes are still doing this to this day and still being successful in doing it. But the Swedes have taken a lesson from me in terms of realizing that cardiac arrest is not enough. There's just not enough cardiac arrest in rural areas to make it feasible for the drone company. So they're now expanding to use a drone for search and rescue, creating a medical drone, as we suggested, that also sends out naloxone, EpiPen, stop the bleed. So send the drone to multiple time-sensitive emergencies, not just cardiac arrest. You will never be successful in cardiac arrest alone. So I think the Swedes are the only one have been able to do it successful. Lots of people talk about doing it. So there's this big thing in Tampa where they said, okay, we're launching it. But when you really ask them, they're all 1 kilometer flights, and you have to have a viewer. So those aren't beyond visual line of sight, which is what we wanted to do in our program. So I think at the end of the day, this is a great idea. Unless there's a change in the regulator, I do not believe it'll ever happen in Canada. I think that what the regulator likes is, I know point A, I know point B, and I know that flight path. What they don't like is knowing point A and not knowing point B, which is a cardiac arrest, and then having to worry about that flight path. That's been the big holdup here in Canada, and really pretty well everywhere around the world, except for Sweden. So hopefully that I gave you the highlight, and I'll give you my low light as well. And like Steve says, we come up with ideas, we work hard on them, we spend plenty of years writing grants and getting people excited about them. Sometimes you do something, it works. Sometimes you do something and it falls flat on your face. Welcome to resuscitation science.
I appreciate your honesty though. So,
Yeah.
you know what, like a lot of lessons did come from that, and learning more about, what works and what barriers may be coming up if we do want to reintroduce this in Canada. Happy Sweden has figured it out, but it may take us a little bit longer to kind of get to the same pace that they're at.
I agree. I totally agree.
So thank you, everyone. We've reached the end of this exciting live event. I want to say we all learned so much, and like the different paradigm, like going from public to private and just combining to just help people accessing AED. That's very fantastic work. So Dr. François de Champlain, Dr. Sheldon Cheskes, Dr. Brooks, thank you all so very much for your effort in promoting the importance of AED and cardiac arrest, and most importantly for your time. I know you're all busy, but thank you very much for attending this panel. Also, while we're here, I want to take this opportunity to advertise our next virtual event as part of McGill World Restart 2024 campaign. We hope you can all make it, so tune in for our second panel on November 5th at 9 a.m., which is Bridging the Gap in Cardiac Arrest Survival, Addressing Inequities for Better Outcome. We'll discuss pediatric cardiac arrest care and inequities. We'll be joined by Dr. Marianne Racine, Associate Chief of Research Division of Cardiac Critical Care Medicine at the Children's Hospital in Philadelphia, as well as Dr. Cody Gators, Pediatric Critical Care Fellow at the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia and postdoctoral research fellow. For more information on our live events, such as dates and link, please make sure to visit our social media platform and our website. And once again, thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, everyone. Thanks for having us.
Thank you.